Hello and welcome to Endgame. Today's topic is meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose in life and why you should be an alien. And you
Yes.
have Nimona as your host and Psych as the other host. Enjoy.
Yay.
Hello.
Nice.
Oh, wow. You were
Hello
just
and
laying
welcome
on
to
the
Endgame.
floor. All right.
Yeah,
Today's
I'm
topic
fine.
is
I was
meaning and
just fucking
purpose.
around. What's up, Psych?
Hello. Hey, everyone.
So
Welcome.
this is a nice little intimate. I'm hoping we can sort of go into this more personally. Like, I wonder if this is something we're gonna be able
Yeah.
to explore in
You guys can
ourselves.
come gather a little closer, but not too close, but closer. But not close enough to respawn back there. But yay. Okay, cool.
So, Psych, what is the purpose of life?
Ah, I have no idea,
Oh, should we just
unfortunately.
go home? Is that the end?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
it.
I guess the idea is that each of us have our own meaning and purpose, sources of meaning and purpose in life. So that's like the key element, kind of one of the key elements of the theory. That's this little diagram kind of thing.
So you're saying there's not like a simple answer?
Yeah, that we all have different sources of meaning and purpose in life, and that kind of like a goal of life is to try to identify what those are, and then figure out activities that we can engage in to express that source of meaning and purpose.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, so I don't know. Do you want to take us through, like, how do you want to do this? Are you going to take us through this diagram first?
Sure. Yeah, so basically, this came out of like research that I was doing with people who have rare and undiagnosed diseases. And we were asking them about like their meaning and purpose in life. So we were trying to understand, what gives someone what drives someone. So like meaning and purpose is like a very broad term, but it's kind of in general, it's kind of like this idea of what drives you, what gets you up in the morning and like motivated. And so this model is kind of like explaining these different types of self that we have. So basically, like right now, all of us have our real self, which is who we are in the immediate moment. So that's like the real self, and you can think of these as like three layers of a sphere, basically. So the outermost layer is our real self, which is who we are right now in the moment. And then the next layer is our possible selves, which is everyone we could be in the future. So that's kind of like the idea of I could be, like a professor, or you could be like a professional artist or something, like who we could be, or who we are right now, but like who we could be in the future, roles and kind of things like that. An ideal self is the who we want to be and like what you're striving to do. So basically, it's like the source of meaning and purpose. So it's like we basically have our real self as a product, like as a result of the possible selves that we've chosen based on our own ideals. That's kind of a lot. I don't know if that makes sense. If you have
Okay.
questions also about that, like, feel free. I'm
It's
not sure if
funny,
I've
just like
explained that
as you
clearly.
go through it that first time, like I would expect to put my real self in the middle of the onion, right? But actually,
Hmm.
you're saying no. In the middle, we're putting sort of an expectation of ourselves or something like, and building
Possible,
out from there.
like who you could be in the future. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Wait, so do you want to talk a little bit more about your research? Like, so
Oh,
how were you exploring this?
Sure. Sure. Did you have a
Oh,
question over?
oh, I was just wondering real quick about it may be a very fringe case for, unfortunately, for some people, but is there a case in which you actually do achieve your ideal self, or at
Yeah.
least your
So
possible self? Your saved
uh,
change.
that's a good question, but like basically, in general, I view ideals as more like values. Like examples of that might be helping others, teaching, creating things. Like these kind of core sources of meaning and purpose that are driving the possible selves that we choose. So like someone might be engaged or social support, like in supporting others socially or getting social support. That might be a source of meaning and purpose. Like so that kind of basically, it's not that you can ever kind of um, fulfill or become a role. That's more the possible selves that you can become. So like if you think about like becoming a teacher or becoming like a professional artist or something like that, that's more the goal. But once you become that, you're still expressing the ideal, which is creation or teaching or helping others, those kinds of things.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Um,
are those
yeah.
coming from outside? Like, like, are we getting our ideals from culture and society, or is it just like innately in us?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, do people, I guess, does anyone, does this like do people have an awareness of like what their own sources of meaning and purpose might be? So some of them might
Yeah.
be like I kind of mentioned some of them, I guess, but yeah, what about what for you is,
Well, cut a very long story short. Essentially, games help me in a very emotionally vulnerable part of my life, and because of that, I have a sense of gratitude that makes me want to keep making them, essentially for their own sake
okay.
and for other
So
players.
so creation of something so that other people can enjoy it.
Well, it is that. It is certainly that, but my sense also comes from almost a sense of doing something for its own sake. Uh,
Okay.
Essentially, just doing it because I believe adding more of it could be, if not an objective good, a very, in my eyes, subjectively good thing.
When you
Yeah.
say do it for its own sake, like that, you also were saying that it helped you, right? It had this positive effect on your life.
Right.
So it seems like the reason you would push that out is not just arbitrary, right? Like it's because of that, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely is because of that. And really any medium could have grabbed onto it. I just think that it depends on the person themselves and and what they're predisposed to. Like me, I have a very artist type personality. I'm very much an artist, and because of that, I'm affected emotionally a lot more than someone else. And because of that, art would be the thing that spurs me on to create, well, more art, essentially.
Okay.
So is that a good example?
Yeah, yeah, that's like a source of meaning and purpose. And like if that's your job, then that's a possible self. So your career or your job is a possible self through which you're expressing the ideal that you've chosen. You've like chosen to engage in a job. You had this possibility. Like you could be, all of us could do anything, but we choose what we want based on our ideals. Although here's what my like research was on is what happens when life circumstances stop you from being able to do what's meaningful. So for
So
me,
if I had that ideal that I want to create and create games, but my life is not allowing me to do so, I'm in some kind of situation where I don't have time or whatever. I'm coming into conflict with my ideal.
exactly. And so like one example that I have is this guy who we interviewed who had an undiagnosable disease basically, and he would go fishing on his fishing boat. And so that was the activity. So like that was kind of like the possible self or the real self. Part of what he did is go fishing on his fishing boat. The ideal, and so he didn't. And one key thing is that a lot of the time we don't recognize what the inner ideal is that we're actually expressing. So he loved to go fishing on his fishing boat, and so through the interview we were asking him, okay, well, what about that was meaningful to you? And through getting to that, he said that he realized that it was actually spending time with his children is what was meaningful to him. That as he had this disease and he couldn't operate a boat anymore because he couldn't like use his left hand, and he had like a kind of a very debilitating disease that went beyond that and couldn't really walk very well and things like that. So he couldn't really use his boat. But he realized that what the important thing to him, the source, the ideal in the activity was actually teaching his grandchildren how to fish. That was the meaningful part of the activity. So once he identified the source, like the ideal, what that kind of ideal self was, he was able to create a new possible self, which is sitting on the dock and teaching his children how to fish, a new activity that he could do with his children that was different from his real self, which is what kind of got limited or whatever by the disease. And so he could kind of go to his ideals and figure out, well, what's meaningful and how can I do this in a new way? That makes sense.
Are most people able to decode that and figure out what their ideal self is, or like you were saying, it's sort of mysterious to us, or it's like maybe subconscious? Hey, Sarah.
I think mostly it sits at our subconscious level, but the key is that if you're able to understand what gives you a sense of meaning and purpose, it can unlock new possibilities of activities that you can do that are fulfilling. So we're all kind of driven by this, but it's, at least that's what the model says. We're all driven by this, but we're not necessarily aware of what's giving us a sense of meaning and purpose.
Hmm. I assume that we
So
get confused sometimes just because of the bullshit that gets piled on us from outside. If what's being expressed to us is like these should be your ideals, right? They're sort of selling us a lot of
exactly.
ideas, and that's confusing.
Uh, yeah, exactly, and it gets really confusing. Catapult, did you have a?
Well, a lot of that from what you've been saying so far, wouldn't it just be a matter of choice?
In what way?
Well, like let's say deciding what you want to do with yourself for the rest of your life, whether it's a career or whatever, a hobby or something, it would be a choice. Sometimes you don't get to have the choice that you want. Like sometimes you have to take a job that it wouldn't be your favorite thing to do, but you do have to put food on the table. And if you got kids, you got, responsibilities and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that having a choice is important, and that being able to choose this. But I guess some people can't, like you're saying, and so that creates like a difficulty, especially if there's some physical illness or something like that. Um, I think it can be very challenging. I mean, I'm curious, like, how many people here, do people feel that they're aware of what gives them a sense of meaning and purpose in life? Like, is that maybe we can do thumbs up or thumbs
I'm
down?
pretty lost on that one. You want to do a
So,
poll?
yeah, let's do a poll. Okay, in 3 seconds, I'll count down from three. So get ready to do an emoji. Thumbs up if you feel that you kind of know what your sources of meaning and purpose are, and thumbs down if you're not sure. In 3, 2, 1.
Bullshit.
Interesting.
Most
Wow.
people
So,
thumbs up. I don't buy
well,
it.
no, I feel like it's about half and half. Yeah. So does anyone want to explain, like either thumbs up or thumbs down? Does anyone want to explain either what their sources are or what they're not sure about? Melody, I see Sarah pointing at Melody, so maybe.
Um, well, I guess I could say I'm just kind of here. I don't really know what I'm doing, so it's just kind of day to day. I don't really
Does
have any
that
sense of
count?
direction, so
If you don't have a sense of direction, does that mean you have an ideal self? If you don't know what you're maybe striving for?
Well, it's probably there. It's just
well, I
that,
also
like,
suffer from depression, so that's probably one of the driving factors behind that. So
hmm. Well, I guess, I mean, what do you feel like, are there any activities that you do that kind of give you that sense of like, this is really exciting for me, or like,
no,
is it,
not really.
okay, and like,
Yeah, so I
You must
really
get
don't know what
joy
I'm
out of
doing.
doing art and doing avatars and stuff.
Sometimes, often it's just kind of dull, really.
Mm.
But yeah, I put on a facade a lot of the times that I'm pretty happy, but most of the times I'm just kind of here, just sitting in the background, not really sure what to say or do. So yeah, I really am kind of purposeless in a way. So
hmm.
yeah.
I relate to that a lot.
Yeah, and that's hard. I mean, it's hard if you don't have the sense, and it's hard to
Aw, thanks,
understand
Sarah.
what they are. Um, I think sometimes it requires exploration as well, like testing out different activities and things to try to try to understand like what that sources of meaning and purpose are.
I would love to hear from one of the people that said like that feels like
Yes.
they know what their ideal is and they're having a positive experience with it. Does
Yeah,
anyone have the bravery
any
to
thumb
step
up?
forward?
I see
You
catapult
can't
and
just point at somebody. Oh, are you actually raising your hand? You're not being bullied into this?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, catapult.
for me personally, it's I'm retired, so I'm pretty happy. Um, I've done my time. I've worked for a long time at one place, and they had a decent pension plan. So here I am, retired for the last 4 years, and I'm just enjoying it. Even though I don't do anything, I don't travel, I don't go anywhere, I don't party. I just sit here, play with VR, play with computers, and drive my wife back and forth to work if she still has to work. And I'm just enjoying myself, just not having
So
to
that's
work.
giving you enough meaning.
I can't really say I need a meaning. Been there, done that, and now it's kind of like it's just time to kick back and relax.
so what do you enjoy about tinkering with computers or using virtual reality?
Well, virtual reality is just the how would you explain that? Like the visuals, the sound, actually being there instead of just looking at it. That kind of thing, that blows me away. Because I've been in computers since the early '80s. I mean, my first computer was a VIC-20. It had 3.5K of RAM. But
Dang.
now it's kind of like, wow, you see this stuff and whatnot. I do have some games, some old games I still play, like Quake 3 and so on and so forth. But for me, I'll do some web browsing, look at YouTube, watch some videos, learn stuff off of there. And I just, like I say, I know who I am. I'm not trying to be somebody I'm not. And I'm comfortable in my skin. And it's either you like me or you don't like me. Either way, I'm fine with it.
Hmm. But it sounds like
If-
that. It sounds like the sources of meaning
Sai?
is kind of, yeah.
One thing I think someone in game once said is that once you get to a certain age in life, you kind of just find inner peace and you're okay with being who you are no matter what really happens. I think it's fair to say Catapult has reached that time in his life.
I
Hmm.
would have to agree, Melody. I would definitely have to agree.
Is that true?
That's
Do we
cool.
age
Yeah.
towards like
Self-acceptance,
feeling? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
a
also
lot of it has to-
relationships.
A lot of
become
it has to
important.
do with experience. You've seen a lot of stuff, you've seen a lot of
Perspective, yeah.
changes and whatnot, and you get to the point where this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. If you don't like it, too bad.
Wait, did
This
you
is
say seen a lot of Jesus?
no, I said seen a lot of things and done a
Oh,
lot of
things.
things and
Okay.
whatnot.
I was like,
But
okay.
it's kind of like if I am who I am. If you don't like it, I'm sorry,
So,
but
so what I'm hearing is that you're kind of at the like real self. You're kind of like you're not thinking about the possibilities of who you could become and things like that. You've become satisfied with who you are, like what you just said, Melody. And
Getting
so
old
like
isn't
as
that bad, guys.
Well, I don't know about you. I'm gonna be young forever, right?
Yeah,
Right,
right.
guys, come on.
all of us.
I am
Yeah.
really interested in you, Catapult, because I'm just interested what it must feel like to be retired, really, because especially coming from somebody who largely is in a field that traditionally doesn't retire. We basically die at our desk, which is way more cool than it sounds. But
it is. Okay,
Yeah.
this is the one thing because I know most of the people in here are fairly young people, and the thing is, I know, oh, I got lots of time, but plan for your future and start it now. RRSPs, pensions, and so on and so forth. Because believe it or not, it's going to sneak up on you a lot quicker than you think, and then when it comes time, you won't be able to retire. And if you're doing something you enjoy doing. I hated what I did. So trust me, getting the hell out of there, and I took an early pension, so I took a bit of a hit on it. But getting the heck out of there was the best thing I could have done. I went from total misery to total happiness, almost like flicking a switch overnight. As soon as I knew I
Oh,
didn't
wow.
have to go there anymore, yeehaw,
Oh, that's cool.
Huh. So,
I can
yeah.
respect that.
Interesting. What about anyone
I've
else?
kind of, I've
Oh, go
kind
ahead.
of thought about myself going the same way, like sort of having this vision of the future. It's like if I can just get over, like, do enough with my life to be content, I would love to sort of retire into the metaverse, right? Like, I came up with this idea when World of Warcraft was like a big thing. It's like if I had nothing but time, maybe I would finally play World of Warcraft and just fall into this world and be happy because like I'm not obligated by life, right? Like, I don't know.
Hmm.
If I may, I actually had a friend of mine. His name was Hardy, or at least that's what his in-game name. He did exactly what you said, but in Lord of the Rings Online, and
He, like,
he was
retired
happy as
into
could
it?
be. What?
He like retired into it.
Oh yeah, like he had a pension plan. He had everything. He just went into Lord of the Rings Online and did not come out until they put him in the dirt.
And it worked. He was cool.
Oh, he was happy as could be. he was
Oh,
he
this
was
is
having a
confirming
great old
lot of
time.
stuff for me.
Well, it was also the kind of person he was. You know, he was very much happy with just being around people because, you know, being, you know, somebody who didn't really have a lot of friends or family, you know, hanging around him, you know, having guildmates was definitely a plus for him.
That sounds like a source of meaning and purpose, which is social support.
Right.
Like having that social support and interacting with others like that, even though it's virtual, gave him a sense of meaning and purpose.
Exactly, which is one of the core reasons somebody plays an MMO is for this social factor.
And
Because otherwise, why are you playing an MMO?
Yeah. So what? Who else? Who else give a thumbs up? I'm curious if you would share yours, what your sense of that is.
And Rubik has joined us. I'm curious if he's found.
Yeah. Hey,
meaning.
Rubik.
I'm kind of in between, because I have something I always fall back to, but I want to try everything else, and I like trying new things. So I don't really know if I belong to what I fall back to, or if I belong to something that I try. It's just I really do not like staying in one place. So I'm going to try everything, and I don't really know if that's the meaning of my life, but I always fall back to this one thing. But I always, as I said, I always go and try new things. So
And what
How's-
is?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, like, what? I mean, are you comfortable sharing, like, what that thing that you fall back to is?
oh well, I like working with websites. I do web development, and that's something I can do at my spare time, and when I'm traveling back and forth between work and whatnot. I want to try everything else. Like I've tried game design, I tried game development, I tried application development and all that kind of stuff. But I always fall back to web development in the end. I tried some real life stuff as well, but I don't know. I always fall back to that, but I don't feel comfortable enough to stay there for the
So it
rest of
sounds
my
like
life.
trying new experiences is potentially a source for you.
Yeah.
Like novelty.
Is that an
trying new
exploration
things.
of? Is that exploring possible selves? Like, I'm curious how stable these things are for people, right? Like, is the idea self some like an idea that sticks with us over a long period of time, and we explore it by taking different jobs and all these
Yeah.
different possibilities, or is the idea self constantly in flux?
It's not clear, but it seems like it tends to be this underlying thing that you're trying out different roles, but also some of the possible selves that you try can influence your ideal self. Like someone could start teaching and realize that they love that, or they could fall into a role that leads them to realize that they really enjoy to do something. Catapult, I'm seeing a explanation point.
Yeah. My concern is a lot of young people will try and be something they're not just to please someone else. Please
Yes.
yourself, like what you are, and don't change for somebody else. If they don't like you the way you are, it's not meant to be. It's just that people will change themselves to try and please someone else, and then it becomes a charade. It becomes something you're not, and eventually that's going to give, and you're going to want to back to your way. You'll want to go back to your way, and the other person won't like it and leave. So all that time wasted, kind of thing.
Yes, that's actually, so that's not like specifically in this model, but that's exactly so other people can have this possible selves of who I could be, what I could do. Sometimes other people have an idea of who you could be and what you could do. And so that's like someone else having their possible self that they're projecting onto you. And if that's separate from who you, if that's different from who you actually are, like what you're saying, then, and some people try to create, be the possible selves that they want like if their parents want them to be a doctor or something like that, and they're trying to become a doctor in that way, then that's like, they're not actually living to their own ideals, they're living to someone else's ideals, and that's a huge source of conflict, I think, for a lot of people. That
It
leads
is.
to like that conflict. Yeah.
You haven't talked much about real self. Are we sort of going up this? Because I feel
I
like we
guess,
explored ideals a lot.
well, real self is kind of like who we are in the moment. So it's kind of like it's a product of the possibilities that we've chosen. So it's just like who we are right now in this moment. Although I think that real self, I think what's interesting with the virtual reality is that it starts to blend the possible selves and real selves because you can just change your avatar. And then also, like Melody, uh, some of the stuff we talked about in the transgender episode also comes to mind. The blending of the two, how like some people, for example, some people mention like being a female avatar and looking in the mirror and realizing that they're assuming a possible, they're kind of testing out that possible self, but then they realize a change in their real self. They realize, oh, I am someone who is transgender, for example. So that's like testing out these possibilities quickly changes who you actually are in the moment as you kind of try out the different possibilities, stuff like that.
I'm sort of curious if you could tell us a little bit more about the research, because like how you conducted that, or what exactly was going on.
Yeah, so basically we interviewed people who had these rare and undiagnosed diseases, and we kind of asked them like what gives you a sense of meaning and purpose in life. And what we found out is that people go through these stages. And there's like another diagram to this that I guess I could have kept put on here too, but they go through these stages where they have, if you lose function, it changes who you are, the real self. Like let's say you have a disease, like, and you can't walk anymore. So all of a sudden there's this functional loss. And what we find if people go through these stages when they have a functional loss, so at first they try to recover and they try to actually fully regain all of the function that they had before. And if people realize that isn't possible, then they go to adjustment, which is kind of making small changes, like maybe using a wheelchair or something like that. But they're still trying to do the same activity. So they're not accepting that their real self has changed. They're still trying to do the same activities that they used to do. And then the third stage is relinquishing. So they kind of relinquish control and kind of accept that they're permanently changed and that their real self has permanently changed as a result of the functional kind of deficit or disability. And then that opens the door for renewal, which is returning to the very core of the ideal self and creating new possibilities of how one can explore the world and things like that based on their ideals. So it's kind of like basically the idea that disease leads the real self to change in a way that forces people to return to their ideals and figure out new possibilities of ways that they can express those inner ideals. And the idea of the research is that if you can teach people this model, that perhaps it can help them cope with disease more effectively because they're not, they see a path forward, kind of like a stages of grief kind of thing.
How has this like changed over time? This conceptualization. Like, is there
Hmm.
like,
I'd say a lot.
well, yeah, but like I don't know enough of the history of like these maps.
You mean the theory itself? How has it changed?
Yeah, but also just the way that we're explaining how we're functioning, right? Like, breaking it down into these three things, I can't imagine this is how they were thinking about it 100 years ago.
Oh, well, I guess, I mean, Freud had the whole stuff about, the id and like these unconscious drives and stuff like that are driving
Would you
us to
say that like
engage.
is id sort of the ideal, maybe, and
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like, because not
superego is
everyone's
the
aware
real?
of it. Yeah, exactly. Not everyone's aware necessarily what's driving them. Um, but you can be aware of it. You can have more control over it than is typically thought of from like the Freudian perspective and things like that. So I think over time we've started to realize that there's a lot more freedom in what we're choosing to do. Although this relates, like we do these documentaries now, like Endgame. We do these documentaries on Saturdays that are hosted by Owlboy, and that's been we watched The Century of Self, which talked about this kind of evolution of the sense of self and how we've become like consumerist culture and stuff. So all that I think relates to like all how people get a sense of meaning and purpose, and the ideals are sometimes tied to products, like thinking that I am someone who owns like cool products and things like that. So I think culture has also shifted this stuff around as well.
I'm sort of curious about like what are the common troubleshooting techniques? Like
Techniques.
yeah, like where
Yeah.
do people stumble here, and then like how do you help them out of it?
Hmm. Well, that is definitely still kind of being worked on.
You can't give me a quick tip? Like
Well, I guess there's like this questionnaire called Sources of Meaning and Purpose questionnaire. So there's like
Mm.
questionnaires that you can take that ask you about different sources like social support or finances or having a sense of control in your life and things like that. So that's one way that you can try to get at the inner ideal. But it's definitely difficult. It's kind of like a tricky thing, and I'm this isn't my area of expertise either, so it's kind of a difficult thing for me to like say like this is how you discover it. But it's kind of like trying to figure out those things that drive you and make you tick. Um, trying to figure out activities that are really meaningful that to engage in, that give one a sense of pleasure and things like that.
it's sort of coming around to this way of thinking of changed the way you were thinking about your own life. Like I wonder if you
Uh,
went through a shift.
Um, I mean, yes, I think that, uh, I actually, this theory explained what I had gone through before with like coming out of the closet and everything. I felt because like, I felt that like the coming out process, just as the transgender, I mean, it's like the same kind of thing, which is like understanding who you are and understanding your ideals. Like the ideal self is like having an authentic relationship. And the whole coming out process is this idea that you can't accept a possible self, that you could be married to someone of the same gender and things like that. So you kind of deny who you are, your real self, until you kind of come to that process and reconcile that the ideal is to be happy and to be fulfilled and have an authentic relationship. Therefore, you have to accept the possible self of being gay. Therefore, my real self now is being gay. So it kind of like explained that whole process. I felt retroactive when I learned about it. Yeah,
Rubik, can't hear you, but it looks like you're talking because you're moving
Might be
your
mute.
hands.
Can you sign language?
Oh, dog.
Um,
Oh. Let me retreat into my little hidey hole.
Aw.
Well, I was curious about something like over time, and I can see examples of the real self and the ideal self. Like over time, it getting easier for the majority of us to have those two things meet, and more difficult in other ways, right? Like as it becomes more acceptable to whatever different sexualities or different whatever different ways that people are, as that becomes more accepted in society, then there's more chance for the real self and the ideal self to meet in people. But I also see ways in which we're seeing more pressure and being sort of pulled in strange directions by corporate power or whatever,
Yeah.
in which I think our ideals and our real self will drift farther apart. Like, do you have a sense of what is sort of happening on average? Like, are we stabilizing or are we destabilizing? Like, as a population, I wonder.
Well, there's also this thing called the ought self, which is your perception of who other people want you to be, which can be in conflict with your real self, which is like the same thing as the coming out or corporations wanting you to think, wanting you to feel like you should be in a certain way or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I feel like virtual reality is unlocking new possibilities of who we can be, and allowing new connections to happen. But I also feel that as like finances get harder, I think like catapult your example of having a job that you didn't particularly like for so many years and things like that can be very difficult, So I'm not sure, but that's always existed as well. So I don't know if things are changing and getting easier or better, or if things are still remaining the same. I mean, what
I'd say
do
they're
you
getting
guys?
worse.
Do you think they're getting? Why is that? I guess.
Well, okay, I know I'm going to hit on a subject a lot of people don't really like much, so it's unpopular. Look at what's happening with labor unions. They're all being folded. The governments are anti-union. The corporations are anti-union, and they convince the people to be anti-union. But if you look in history, labor unions are what got you weekends off. Labor unions are what got you a 40-hour week instead of Lord knows, how long. Labor unions got you time and a half if you worked overtime. Labor unions got you all the conditions that exist now, but yet now the corporations are trying to take all that back because there's no more unions. The unions are all folding. The few that still have unions, they don't have the power they used to.
And while that's happening, we're being more productive by a lot. Like our productivity keeps going up, but yet we end up not seeing any return on that.
Yeah, but then you look, there's also so few jobs because you'll do the job of what used to take 3 people.
Yeah.
Catapult, I'm sorry if this is I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, but why does corporations hate unions?
Because unions, what unions would do is we have a contract. Let's say it's a 2-year contract. At that contract, we get, let's say, 3% wage increase for each year. We're going to get paid benefits. So let's say medical, dental, that kind of stuff. A portion of if you need meds, portion of that is paid by this plan and whatnot. Well, what happens, this costs the company money. So they would rather not have to pay that and let you die because you can't afford the meds than having to come out of their corporate pockets and the stockholders' pockets and so on and so forth. But the thing is, the unions fight for the workers' rights, where the corporation is trying to take away workers' rights.
Yeah, like as an individual, it's hard to sort of fight for it yourself, but a union is,
one individual makes a stand, that's it, out the door you go, goodbye.
Well,
and
funny
Eve,
enough.
did you?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, if Eve already had her hand raised.
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
It's
Well, it's a little bit choppy.
Well,
why don't you
Eva's
try
trying
to
to
go
get
and we'll
that
see if that
settled.
gets fixed.
Yeah. I will say this much is that Catapult is correct on that regard. And I can tell you that he is correct because my industry is a lot like the film industry before it unionized. Because one of the biggest problems we have in our industry is something called crunch, where basically we work 80 to 100 hours of work a week, working nonstop. So I do agree with you on that end. But it's also due to the fact that it's game development. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. Get on out. Hey, kid off the street, why don't you come in and we'll get you started and you can start making games. Dream job that everybody wants.
Yeah, but the thing is too, there's some industries that are very dangerous. That I worked in one of those. I was a railroader, and we had a saying going, profits first, safety last kind of thing, because the corporation was always trying to take and take and take, and it gets to the point where they don't want to spend money on safety equipment. They don't want to spend money on fixing the track. They don't want to spend equipment or money fixing the equipment. So now, if you happen to be standing at the wrong place when the car decides to jump the track, railway equipment has no conscience. It will cut you in half.
Oy vey.
And there's also more like
corporations.
Sorry,
can you repeat that?
Penny pinching corporations.
Yes. Yes.
They all
that's their job.
And
Yeah,
also,
that is
fast
technically their
food
job.
and things like that.
As long as you got the stockholder system, greed will continue to happen.
Yep. And
So is that robbing of it? Is that robbing us of meaning? Like that's why that we started this because like is that making this situation harder for us?
Yeah, I feel like it is, and it's like the same thing with fast food jobs and things like that. Like if people, I don't know, sometimes I go to Subway and I walk in and I see the people behind the counter and with a kind of blank face and kind of going through automatically with the motions, and it's hard. I feel like that's it doesn't feel meaningful, and so it's a difficult thing that we have more. So maybe automation will force us into a world in which we're all able to pursue meaning through like having universal basic income and things like that. But maybe it'll also force us into jobs that are less meaningful. It's kind of hard to know what'll happen in that regard.
I saw an article and I didn't read it, so maybe you know, but like, is it true that for millennials, like depression is up? Like that's another thing I was like curious about. Like the people that
Yeah.
you would expect to be doing better are actually doing worse.
Well, I feel like millennials always have headlines. It's always like millennials this, millennials that. It's always like really negative.
But now
and
they're
kinda...
depressed.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if that's. I
Why do
don't
you?
know where the numbers came from. Yeah,
Oh,
like
maybe it's inaccurate. Yeah, like go ahead.
Why there's so many young people blamed for so many today's problems?
yes.
Like millennials.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know.
Seriously,
Because they
every
have no
headline,
power, right?
every headline is like millennials. You know, it's just so negative. I don't
Well, it's
know.
always who's running that, media outlet, like what their goal is. They seem to be shitting on someone or blaming, whoever.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of we're the scapegoats of society, but it's okay.
I'm not a millennial.
Yeah.
You are.
I was told somewhere that millennials are the reason that fabric softener sales are down because we're just not buying any.
You know what? Yeah.
Eve, you didn't happen to get your sound working, did you? Oh,
No.
We can hear you, but your sound
It's
is
like
cutting out.
flipping in and out.
Oh, I don't know what the problem is.
God damn, I can't understand.
But you can blame her for not using fabric softener.
Maybe if you restart your voice app.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Or try to change on your computer what mic you're using. Oh. All right, Namona's having a little
I'm fine.
moment. Upset by millennials, clearly.
So what should we be thinking about going forward? Like after you've done this research and you've sort of taken these ideas in, and you wouldn't give us any tips really for how to change, but how does the future has the future changed at all in your mind, sort of knowing this, or can you see there being technological solutions to help bring these things into alignment or solve some of the problems we're talking about?
Yeah, I feel like it'd be cool to have an AI that can ask you questions in an open-ended way to try to figure out what your source purpose are. I think
So
that'd be
we're
a
back to
really
the
helpful
AI
thing.
therapist.
Yes, I guess that's true. Yeah, but more like a sorting hat at Hogwarts, but more, meaning sources
God,
of meaning and purpose.
those stupid fucking quizzes in Facebook where it's like, hey, who are you in Hogwarts, or who are you in whatever? Like those are going to get. They're eventually going to get so powerful that they will actually benefit you, and they'll give you an outcome that will give you some solutions maybe for your life.
I know but it's really just sponsored by Cambridge Analytica, so that's how they
No,
got all that data.
it's going to be more positive. Something it'll be good.
It's like something on millennials. When I was working, I was listening to a radio talk show one night on a radio at work, and they were talking to this lady, child psychologist, and she said, when my profession suggested, and which became law pretty much, that we should stop corporal punishment, we opened up a can of worms we shouldn't have.
What is that?
Corporal punishment. Getting, when you're in school or at home, you don't behave, you get the ruler on the butt kind of thing.
So now that we're not using
see
as
capital.
aggressive punishment.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about the death penalty. Sorry.
No, corporal
I was like,
punishment, not
just
capital.
for millennials? Or...
Holy shit, like.
Well, that came out in what, the 90s, mid 90s or so?
Yeah. No,
Is that true?
Yeah.
You guys are all broken because we didn't hit you enough?
Oh man.
I mean, that's clearly why I don't buy fabric softener. I'm just saying. If I was hit more, I would need softer fabric, but I don't know.
You know what would actually be what's Melody's best alternate statement? You know why malls are dying? Because everyone is online shopping. I think that would actually be the best alternative.
That is true.
Third statement.
Yes. Well, you look at Walmart. You walk into their store and they say shop online.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they want to compete with Amazon, I guess.
Want to be able to shut all the stores down so they don't have to pay all these people and have this high overhead for the building.
It's cheaper, yeah.
The Amazon people aren't unionized, right? The
No
people in the
idea.
warehouse. Okay.
No idea.
No.
I would say it
Still
would
live in
depend on the
forests.
state, because some states have anti-labor laws.
Hmm.
Yeah. They do have free aspirin in dispensers for people in Amazon warehouses.
So you could just keep going.
Yeah, it's really messed up. Yeah. So, well, I hope this wasn't too depressing. That I
Lighten
can't,
it.
like,
You can't give us
find the
some positive.
Well, I feel like if you that. Oh yeah, Phil. Oh, I can't tell if you're raising your hand or not.
Microphone. Oh, there's just hand.
Maybe not.
The microphone's not working.
Oh, was this?
Hello?
We might have.
Oh yeah,
there you
I
go.
can hear you.
My indicator on the left is like invisible. But while we're talking about whether it's easier for us as a society to go from the real to ideal self, I was wondering, is it ever possible for us to reach the ideal self, or will it always be someplace other place
Yeah.
away?
Yeah, I think that, like, I mean, also Maslow talks about like this idea of self-actualization, which is like becoming our ideal selves and things like that. But I think it depends on the theorist and stuff. But I think that we always have these sources that are driving us. So it's like you can be tapping into. I guess the goal in life, in my opinion, is to tap into our sources of ideal. Like, find what gives you a sense of meaning and purpose, what helps you wake up in the morning, gets you excited, what gives you a sense of pleasure, and try to figure out not just what the activities are, but what it is about those activities that makes positive feelings occur in you. And having that ideal part of those activities that's something that we can all keep with us and find new activities to do and kind of like build on itself.
Is this
to
something
create
that we're
a
all
happy life.
going to be individually responsible for, or is this something that society can help us with? Or ultimately, this is just all down to each of us on our own? Because it is interior.
Yeah, it requires reflection. Yeah, it does require reflection, and I think that's an issue with society where, like, you go through school and you're going through like learning kind of rote things, or like everyone who goes to college without necessarily knowing, and they don't discover during college what they want to do or things like that. It's like, I think we do need more prompting about reflecting on this kind of stuff in our classes in education, so that people can try to learn like what gives them a sense of meaning and purpose. Drives them.
I agree, and I think Rubik might have had his hand up, or I could have been hallucinating.
Yeah, earlier my mic was working at all. Actually, it's not working half the time, it feels like. Test.
We can hear you.
It's kind of low.
We can hear you.
A little bit quiet, but
I don't know why. It's fucking max.
It's okay.
Test. I don't know.
It's working.
I can hear you.
We can hear you,
Okay.
Rubik.
So, my question earlier was, is there always a cycle or like a loop between the what it's called, the real self, doubting yourself, and then trying to change it to attain it, and every time you do this, you start a new cycle, and you basically never achieve it at any point?
What do you mean exactly?
do we have to be like in a closed loop between changing our ideal, identifying our real self, and then re-examining our ideal? And like, does it have to is it cyclical, or can it maybe catapult, or can you break that loop and reach a conclusion where you're no longer oscillating and changing and rediscovering yourself?
I
think that depends on how you define success and failure.
No, I mean about the events that happen to you specifically in life. Because you talked about disease earlier, but every time something happens to you, a relationship, a new job, a new responsibilities, your real self is going to be changed or at least challenged by whatever new thing happens to you. So can you ever truly be yourself unless you live in an environment that allows you fully to be yourself?
A completely stable, safe environment, or just
Yes,
something that
like
would never
the
change.
safest possible one. I don't know if that exists at all.
That's like a philosophical question.
I think that would drive you crazy. I think it is. I think it's hard to create this out of nothing, to create meaning and all these things, given just yourself in a room and no conflict or anything. Like, I think that's difficult. I think we need sort of to progress through bumps and stuff in our road and to react to exterior events or whatever to sort of discover this stuff.
Yeah. We need like something to happen to us in order to put ourselves in a context and develop sort of meaning.
But at the same time, not making it make you sick. Like Rubik was saying, you're in the ideal job and the ideal conditions and all that. And if you start thinking, what if I get laid off? What if the company goes belly up and I, end up without this great job? What if? Never mind a what if. Enjoy the friggin' moment because they're far and few between.
Good advice. Well, that's definitely true. If there's any other
sabotaging ourselves all the time. Every time it goes well, oh my god, something's gonna happen. Like it's too good to be true.
Sometimes you look at the doom and gloom and you end up making your own doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my question, to be more specific, can anyone else that is not a psychological, pathological liar that truly believes in what he says to be true, like if you actually are mentally ill to a point where you see what you think is, can you actually truly be yourself?
Yes or no question, Psych.
Wait, I don't understand the question.
Yes or no? I need to know.
Maybe. Oh, come back, Rubik.
Well, before you drive anyone else away, or is there a way you could phrase that? Or no, okay. So I wonder if anyone has like a more positive conclusion before we wrap this up.
Mono?
Melody.
I think I have an answer, but it's rather simplistic. Yeah.
Okay.
I think in general, yes, you could, but it will take you a lifetime to get there.
It takes a lifetime, Psych. It's a journey.
On the deathbed, we have always that image of, old people saying, I've had a great life, I've done everything I've always wanted, I've had kids, I'm happy, I can die in peace. It feels like that's truly that moment. If you die of like old age or in a happy place, you can truly like look back at what you did and truly see the amplitude of things. But as long as you are growing and things keep happening to you in any daily situation as an adult, if you are really old, nothing can happen to you besides breaking a hip or dying, pretty much. So if you're just a normal adult, something is going to always happen to you. So you can never truly be satisfied with what you have, because it can always be taken away really quickly. So you have to adapt and expect.
But I think it's interesting because this model came out of people who are younger, or maybe 50s and things like that, who had the disease and they're dying from it, and that's what forced, when things are taken away from them, that's what forced them to return to their ideals and realize that they are satisfied, that it doesn't matter about the tangible things, or that they can't go fishing anymore, because what matters to them are their relationships, or helping others, or giving back to society, or religion is another really big one that people talked about. So it's interesting that when people are packed into a corner and are facing death, no matter what their age, that it's almost like human nature to return to our sources of meaning and purpose and try to figure out, the important things.
There's echoes here of like Eastern philosophy, or like almost Buddhism or something, which is like so different than I think we're usually in the West. Like I would assume that you're going to school here, and like a lot of the ideas would be much more westernized. And sort of like, I don't know. There's something about life as suffering. Lyco?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
So is this question time?
Yeah,
Oh,
the whole time is
um,
question time.
sorry. Who do you think would be the best teacher to find a purpose in life? Would it be parents, friends, school teachers, or the environment around them?
Yourself.
That's a good question.
Answer that
I
is
think it's
yes.
yeah. I think it's got. You're lucky if you come across like a good mentor. Like we all come across some variety of these people. I don't think it can come down to one. Like it can't just be a parent. Well, maybe if you have
Yeah.
a really good parent that puts you on the right path. But I assume we'll sort of discover this stuff by taking away experiences from the different heroes we meet along the way on our
Yes.
journey here.
Yeah, the key is reflection. So thinking about these kinds of things. I mean, even what we're doing right now, thinking about this, like I'd hope that people come away with like, next time you're doing something that you enjoy, thinking about, well, what about this do I enjoy? It's not just that I enjoy fishing or, going snowboarding or, doing therapy with people or whatever. It's like actually, by the way, I've never really been fishing, so I just kind of made that up. But
You've never gone fishing, Si?
I mean, like once or twice, but in Orbis VR, I went fishing, so maybe that counts.
That doesn't.
But,
That
like, it
counts.
felt like I was, but
No,
but yeah, like reflecting, like what you're saying. I think you can discover these things. It's a really good question. I think talking to these people and trying to figure out, like, reflecting on what makes you happy and what gives you a sense of that meaning and purpose. I think it's intentionally vague. It's supposed to be vague because it's different for every person.
So technically, there is no teacher that can help you along your path. There's only helpers that can help you strive towards, or that can help you push towards whatever you want to do.
Well, I don't
And
think that's
yourself.
actually what he's saying, really. I think, well, anyway, from my perspective of it all, is it, of course, depends on what kind of person you are and what drives you. But somebody who's professionally driven like me, I find my mentors to be in my field because they're people who think and act like I do who have already been through the ringer. Like I have a mentor like person that helps me along the way because he's somebody a lot like myself and he can give me some tips and tricks along the way that I don't even really think about because he's already been through and he's been like, dude, don't do that. That's a bad idea. And you can choose to listen if you want to, but it always depends on what you tend to enjoy and what your personality is about and where you can find people like that.
Yeah, so they're technically not teaching you; they're just helping you along the way, guiding you along the way towards whatever you feel, and then you choose the path that you want to take.
Yeah, because all they can really do is just suggest what to do. It's really up to you to make the choice. But I mean, at this point, I always take what they say with a grain of salt. But at the same time, they've also are a lot like me and have been through the similar things that I have. So I should probably listen pretty darn close to what they're saying.
Yeah, but they're guides to you. They're not teachers.
So what you're
Exactly.
saying is that you should depend. You shouldn't depend one person or a few people, but rather to different people mentoring you.
Yeah,
what I would say is, yeah, exactly.
back to
That's a
yourself.
great point.
And yourself as well.
Yeah,
exactly.
But
It's incredibly dangerous for us all to put a power into a single individual, right? To all look to one person for like all our ideals. Like that seems very dangerous and
That's a god
monotheistic or something. Sorry, and I think I interrupted somebody back there.
Or Rubik.
No, just basically because you said this theory came out in the 50s, why isn't it disregarded completely? Because back then you had extreme pressure on you on the religious side or like just in social contexts in general. You couldn't be yourself. Like you couldn't really be homosexual, you couldn't really be transgender, you couldn't really be like even in some places you couldn't be black, you couldn't be white. Like it's really difficult back then to imagine that. Yeah, I mean in South Africa or in Asia, that was really there's places still. It's not the same, but I mean it's kind of the same. But this theory that you can be yourself, and even though there was that many, I mean you basically were in a mold from when you were born, you grew up in a mold. Like, what does it mean back then to be yourself? Because you were shaped to be like a copy of your parents, and you shouldn't stray from the path.
Well, that's what Freud. That's why, like, so this theory wasn't from the 50s or I think it was more from, I think it was like 80s maybe or something like that. But I know that Freud's kind of theory about repression and subtle unconscious drives. The reason that he had that in like the early 1900s, or like late 1880s or whatever, is because of these kinds of exactly what you're saying, Rubik, that people were repressed, and that so he was seeing all these unconscious drives because society was not allowing people to express themselves. So like in a world where people aren't allowed to talk about any kind of sexualized stuff, there's probably going to be more repression. That doesn't mean that everyone is having that occur, but yeah, I don't know if
Looking to the future, like don't ignore the sign. We keep talking about how we're going to really be able to become our true selves in the metaverse and sort of explore whatever we want and live in our dreams and fantasies. Like, what's going to happen? Or is this all going? Are we going to work all this out? Like, this seems like this is going to get a lot easier. Yeah, Melody.
I actually kind of have almost a tangent, but it kind of almost invalidates this whole Endgame.
Oh, fuck. Okay, well, let's end with that.
If you take note with society, history of the human race, we've always been developing one trend. In the older ages, we worshipped gods, we didn't pay much attention to self, and we tried to put our gods before us. In this century, and in recent times, it's been more about the individual. And pushing forward, it's predicted that the human race might become more of a hive mind. And if that's true, then the actual concept of a self is kind of irrelevant. So if that's true, if mankind is less about the individual person and more about the whole going forward, then what does that chart even have a purpose for anymore in the future?
Where'd the chart go?
It gets around.
The real self.
I mean, it's a scary thought to think about it, but the ideal self might be referencing the entire human race.
That's interesting because, like, when we think about the hive mind, like it is all of us banging up against each other with our different ideals and sort of creating a global average. Like, I wonder what that ideal is at this time, and then what it will morph into in the future, and how focused and how much we will eventually agree or find something.
So, really,
if we
all
will
I
find
can
the
say
ideal
is that
self of the hive mind.
maybe there's a bigger picture out there that we just don't see yet.
Well, it's a luxury as well to be able to think about this, because millions, if maybe not billions of people don't have a choice or time or the occasion to think about this because they're working in a mine all the time or in a sweatshop in India, or like we can ask this question to ourselves because we have something else that we want to achieve, but some people don't expect to live more than like a few more years, or like something's going to happen. They don't have time. So yeah, it's not a question for humanity yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I guess I'm just a little bit optimistic, and I expect that if we get through some of this mess, a lot of the people who today are like barely surviving at the very bottom rung, like, you know, technology and as things advance and as scarcity is less and less of it, it's already something we should have been able to overcome. But like, it will get better from the bottom up if we can fucking defeat the people at the top of the pyramid. All right, Syke, what's up? Let's close this out. Are you satisfied?
Yeah. Yeah.
If Arana didn't say anything,
guys...
Dojo didn't add anything, and now it's over.
Arana's got a hand up.
Oh.
I had my hand up ages ago, but you never called me either.
Oh, sorry, dude.
You gotta use the exclamation point.
I guess you're not used to it, but I was just gonna say, what was I gonna say? I was gonna say something earlier, and then everyone went off on something else. Oh yeah, hold on, keep the sign still. I'm trying to read it. If I just noticed that a lot of people said that they don't know what their meaning and purpose is, and you asked people earlier, like why they gave a thumbs up, and I gave a thumbs up. I don't feel like I know exactly what I want to do in life on like a physical level, but I think that everybody might relate to the fact that most people feel like they need to have a purpose. You know, like in the first place. So if you feel like you don't have a purpose, but you feel like you need one, you could always just kind of resonate with the fact that it might be your current purpose to find a purpose, and then you'll have a purpose.
I like that.
I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like
I
it's
like
just
that.
that's a mindfulness, like being present. Like stop thinking about all this other stuff and
Yeah,
just
you
come
wanted
down
a
to where you are right
Positive
here.
ending, so that's what I was
Like what
thinking.
Catapult said too. Yeah.
All right,
I
thank
like
you
that.
very
Gonna be-
much.
That's a
That's a
good
lot more
nugget.
positive than anything that you talked about.
Aww.
No, Psych, I love you. Come back. All right. Thank you, everybody, for
Yay,
coming.
thanks, guys.
Let's all line
Let's
up
get a
for
picture.
a
Let me.
picture.
I'll turn off the security.
Well,
Hold
let's
on.
just go somewhere else because okay.
For once.
It's like let's just stand in the middle where it's lit. Okay, let's go to
Bring
the
back
lobby.
the
Ghoster says.
seats.
Go to the lobby.
Yo, Psych, why does
First
the
one there is the
theory
Rodden
look like the
Avatar.
5 stages of grief?
Well,
You guys didn't
I just
teleport?
teleported off the stage.
oh, that's smart. No, I didn't think of that.
The one you had on
Well,
the
maybe
screen.
some of us should
It's
go out
like
the
the
window.
what you said earlier, it's like, you know,
Oh, here.
accept, fight it.
Oh yeah,
be
yeah,
angry.
yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh, goodbye.
Oh, that.
Oh yeah, don't step too
I
far
don't
out.
know. I mean, we kind of
That
came up with
failed.
it qualitatively.
Are we
Oh,
all,
are
we're
we
all
gonna
trying to
go
get
out
back
there?
in?
I like
It's
this.
a
I like
terrible
this.
idea.
We're
No,
trying
no,
to
no,
find
no,
our
no.
meaning and purpose.
Wait, what the heck?
You're getting the nachos?
Let us
Here.
in.
Go out on the side here, like
in Spruce Meadows.
On.
That's the only
All
place
right.
on
that
this
they sell them
like
at.
Oh, cool. Excellent. When you get
What are we gonna say,
Whoa.
Ghoster?
Probably the 30th, most likely.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Maybe
good
sooner,
luck with it.
but I doubt it.
There we go. Perfect.
What do you guys think
missed it.
of Who Am I?
Okay.
You're bored.
We are the Borg.
Alrighty then. So
Sorry,
taking
Sheila,
a picture in 3, 2, 1.
Who am I?
Who are you?
Who are
Who is us?
Who?
Why are we?
Who? I really want to know.
pretty
Don't
sure
worry
it's
about
still
it. I
a
got
simulation,
like so many
but
pictures
I'm
so
not
far.
sure.
Yay.
Cool.
Thanks, guys. for
Awesome.
coming.
Thank you, Ghoster. Thanks, everybody.
You need to be able to jump.
Oh man, I didn't get in the picture. Rigged.
Yay.
Nice.
Next time, next time.
Thank
Meaning
you.
and purpose.
What, did we make the time? Yeah, that's a. I mean, maybe it was a little bit.
Are you trying
It's
to
a
read
little bit
that?
long, but I think we basically.
I think it was good.
Thanks for
We
coming.
made
in.
an hour. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
it's a
it's
little
cool.
bit.
It's like it's
Yeah,
nice when
like
it's this
10 minutes
small and
over.
there's enough people to sort of.
Yeah, but we also started late.